Hello there, Tunnel Lord. Looks like you finally got the, either you got the link or you used an old one. Okay. Hello there, everyone. We'll be starting up in a few minutes. We start at the top of the hour. I'm just giving everybody a chance to find the links, find the live streams, register, sign into the Zoom call. So we'll start at the top of the hour.
Hello?
Hey there, Tunnel Lord.
Oh, let's see. invited one individual who might be able to help us out with the getting you out here in North Idaho, but I don't know.
Okay.
There's well, there was another individual, but be right back.
I'll be here. Okay. Oh, well, it looks like I got one person on Periscope. I'm not seeing anybody from YouTube yet, but I don't trust them. Partially because, well, I love when I get questions from more names than these systems tell me are actually on my live stream. So we got a couple more minutes. I want to give, I tried to start right on time your time is valuable. You take time out of your day to come and listen to me, come talk to me. I figure it's worth my time to do it on time. And if people straggle in, well, they straggle in. Yeah, it's funny. One app tells me I've got one person watching. One app tells me I have no people watching. I don't trust these apps anymore.
Are we live now?
Well, it's running live so that the links are up so that people can join on YouTube and Periscope, but I haven't quite started yet.
All right.
I try to be particular. I like starting. I'm a little anal that way. I like starting on time. But if you got something else to chat about for the next 30 seconds, hey, whatever.
Well, your radio broadcast was really good, discussing the whole, the Convention of States, or the what else was it? It was Convention of States and
Convention states and term limits.
term limits specifically. Yeah.
Yes, I kind of figured today, if there's nobody has a question, I figured I'd start by stoking that fire because that usually gets people fired up.
Yeah. Yeah.
If there's a smoldering ember and I want to throw some gasoline on it, I usually talk about the Convention of the States, and that usually lights people up. So we'll probably talk about that. But we're at the top of the hour. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Constitution Study. This is where we read and study the Constitution. We teach the rising generation to be free. You have joined my live Q&A. Now, if you're watching this live, you found us. That's great. If you're new to this, I do have a Zoom call open where people can join in. If you want the chance to join that Zoom call, go to the website, constitutionstudy.com. You'll see a calendar on the right-hand side. Just find one of the dates and register. It doesn't matter which one. You're supposed to get a reminder several days leading up to the call that includes the link for the Zoom call. I apologize for those who missed it. I had a problem in my system this week. It didn't send out the alerts. It was my fault. I goofed something up. So hopefully we'll get that right in the future. If you're watching on YouTube or Periscope, you can ask a question in the chat, in the comments. They will pop up on my app, and I will do my best to answer them. All I ever ask is that it be somehow related to Constitution, freedom, liberty, something like that, and that we be polite and respectful. We're not all going to agree, but anybody who goes too far will be warned and then removed, and that's the name of that game. So, with that, if you heard the Tunnel Lord, our president-elect, that's a long-running joke going now, Tunnel Lord, was talking about the radio program. So I've got several feeds of methods of disseminating information. I've mentioned one, I've got constitutionstudy.com. I have written articles, I have videos, I post a replay of this Q&A up there. It's got a lot of good information. Obviously, I'm on YouTube. I do the lives on streams on Periscope as well. I'm on Rumble. But I have now a program on the America Out Loud Radio Network. So if you haven't gotten enough of me by the end of this program, you can hear me 5 days a week at 4 p.m. Eastern time on AmericaOutloud.com through the America Out Loud app, or you can also find me on iHeartRadio. And the reason he brought up is I picked a topic that generates pretty much every time I bring it up, it generates a lot of emotion. And that's different ways people talk about fixing the Constitution. And I want to make two things abundantly clear. I have no problem with a convention of the states. It's perfectly constitutional. I don't see, I see issues that can be made, but I don't think a convention of the states is a bad thing. I just don't think it's going to fix a problem. And it'll take a couple days, but today's episode should be on the America Out Loud page. Just go to America Out Loud under shows, look for the Constitution study and listen to a replay. I don't think it's going to fix anything, because I don't think the problem is the Constitution. Now, there are things I would love to change in the Constitution. I would love to repeal the 16th and 17th Amendments. I think those are terrible. I wouldn't mind an amendment that puts restrictions on Congress's ability to borrow without the permission of the states. I think that might be a good idea. But here's my problem. Here's the concern I have, and it's twofold. Problem number one, Congress has already determined that should there be a sufficient states request a convention of the states. And for those of you not familiar, there are two ways to propose amendments to the Constitution. The one we've always used, which is a resolution out of Congress. The other is via convention of the states. According to the fifth Article 5 of the Constitution, if I think 3/4 of the states petition Congress to call a convention of the states, Congress has to call this convention for the purpose of proposing amendments. The problem, the first problem we have is there's a Congressional Research Service report where they go in and say Congress is going to have to be controlled. Congress would have to regulate the convention. That's the opinion of the research arm of Congress. There's nothing in the Constitution. Basically, all Congress has to do is say, yep, 3/4 of states have asked for it. We need to call a convention. We need to find a time and a place, and then everything else should be done by the states in the convention. So if you read the report and they talk about, well, how many delegates does each state send and how do they vote, and all of that should be dealt with by the states. All Congress should really do is say, okay, on this date, at this time, in this location, we're going to call a convention. But Congress doesn't believe that. They want to maintain control of the convention. Now, they say they want to do it to prevent a runaway convention. A runaway convention is a bit of a myth. Even if the convention went completely hog wild and rewrote the entire Constitution, it would be legally meaningless until 3/4 of the states actually ratified it. So, problem number one is Congress are going to get their dirty little mitts into the process, even though they've got no constitutional authority to do that, because problem number two, they already ignore the Constitution. And the thing that I have yet to get a good answer to is, if they're already ignoring the Constitution, if they're ignoring the rules, how does changing the rule book fix the problem? So, I mean, that's, I don't think it's a bad thing. I would like to see some amendments proposed. I really don't think Congress is going to vote away the income tax. I really don't. Congress is going to propose getting rid of the popular election of senators. I believe it gives them too much power. That would have to come from the states. But I don't think it fixes the root cause of the problem. To me, it's rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. We're in trouble. We're going down, and we're worried about, is everything lined up nicely? So that gets into a lot of, and that usually, I've got certain people that usually generates a lot of heated discussion, shall we say. Now, the other thing that I talked about in the program, which also tends to generate a lot of interest, is I am not for term limits. I'm sure there's a bunch of people out there that I just made very, very angry, but I am not for term limits, and I will give you a couple of really good reasons. These are my reasons. Problem number one, lame duck officials. Anybody remember when President Obama told President Medvedev to tell Putin that once he gets past this election, once he gets past his re-election, then he'll be a lot more free to do whatever he wants? That was a president that was basically a lame duck for 4 years. We have right now, any president gets elected to a second term, they're a lame duck. They don't have to stand for re-election. What happens when every member of Congress, after so many years, after so many terms, is a lame duck for 2 years? What happens when a senator is a lame duck for 6 years? To me, that doesn't work out very well. I have some serious concerns with what would happen in those situations. That's problem number one, lame duck officials. Problem number two, term limits don't simply say, Mr. Mrs. Candidate, you are no longer able to run. Term limits tell the people who they can vote for. And I don't like the American people being told who they can and can't vote for. Term limits effectively say, you're too stupid to know what's best for you, so I'm going to put limits on how you can vote. And I know it's not presented that way, but that is the effect of a term limit, right? It's usually the losing party. We have to look at the presidency, right? No one was talking term limits until after FDR won his fourth term, died in office, and then as a plank in their platform, Republicans in Congress ran on the idea of presidential term limits. They could not beat him. They could not beat a Democrat in the ballot box, so they wanted to limit the voice of the states. You cannot vote for him again, then by extension, the voice of the people. So term limits basically tell people, you're too stupid to know you're not supposed to vote for this person anymore. I don't like that. Number three, term limits aren't the problem. Every elected official you can term limit any official you want by simply saying, I will not vote for them after so many terms. You convince enough of your fellow citizens of that, voila, you don't need term limits. The interesting thing, back to the president, right? George Washington established the tradition of 2 terms. And until FDR in 1930s, no president served more than 2 years. Now, several tried, a handful tried, they just couldn't win. Either the people directly or the party they were working for decided, nope, 2 is enough, thank you very much, until FDR. Now, tell me, since FDR, have presidential candidates really gotten that better? Well, maybe FDR's way better. Let's look. Let's take a look. We've had so you've got Reagan, Bush 41, Clinton, Bush 43, Obama, Trump, and Biden. Now notice a couple things. You see it flip-flopping back and forth between parties. That's kind of normal. That's kind of expected. But tell me, which one of those presidents really restrained themselves to their constitutional authority? None. Now, for example, I thought President Trump did a good thing when he said we're going to restrict regulations. If you want to have a new regulation, we got to get rid of 2 regulations. I thought that was a good policy. But this is the same man that said a accessory to a firearm that does not change its rate of fire suddenly makes it a machine gun. Congress didn't say that. The president did. So, you have the Affordable Care Act, but you've all, from under Obama, but you also had the Patriot Act under Bush 43. See, the problem is, in my point of view, you're playing musical chairs with an office. But if you look at it, most elections, the number of seats that change party in Congress is generally fairly small. It's generally around 10 seats out of 435. 10, maybe 20. A big year is 50 or 60. Not wholesale changes. So if we say, okay, there's a term limit, so this seat, which is currently held by a Democrat, that Democrat can't run anymore. What is that Democrat going to do? They're going to campaign for the next Democrat in line. Oh, by the way, the Republicans are going to do the exact same thing. If the Republican is term limited, then the next Republican in line, they're going to all campaign for the next Republican. So we're just going to be playing musical chairs because the same people are voting for them. The problem, if you think the problem is people are serving too long, the problem is people keep voting for them. Now, in some situations, there's shenanigans and fraud and stuff like that. We need to deal with that, but that's not a term limit problem. That's it's a voting integrity problem. It's an election integrity problem. So now you're telling me that we're going to create a whole bunch of lame duck politicians because we think the American people are too stupid to know what's good for them, and we're going to turn it into a political party musical chairs, meaning the political parties get even more power. Because now the way to get to, if your ultimate goal is to end up in Congress, the way to get there is get in line, be a good party hack, and wait your turn. And voila, you end up in Congress. Kind of the same way we do with the presidency, right? Remember Bush 41, Clinton, Bush 43? And we had Clinton ran a couple more times. We have Clintons and Bushes running like crazy. Doesn't solve the problem, because the root cause of the problem are the people who are voting without vetting, or I would think their standard of vetting is substandard. My standard of vetting starts with one simple question. Show me how you fulfilled your oath to support the Constitution when it was difficult. Not when everybody was going along and everything was fine. Show me where you stood athwart the will of the party, athwart the will of the pundits, and said, no, the Constitution says this. That is my oath. And you know how often I see that? Very rarely. Very rarely. So the problem is we keep voting. How can you tell when a politician's lying to us? Their lips are moving. The problem is we keep voting for people who are lying to us, not simply, oh, they're serving too long. Those are my problems. So I'm looking around here. I do not see any questions on YouTube or Periscope. Interesting. YouTube. I'm beginning to get very suspicious of YouTube. My viewership numbers have been steadily dropping for no apparent reason. And I'm not sure why. So I don't know that YouTube is actually reporting my stuff the way it's supposed to. I don't know if they're following all the rules.
It's not, well, I have a question afterwards, but
Yep.
like it's more of a comment. Well, so that's not the only thing. Like the people think the Convention of States will solve everything, or they think term limits will solve everything, and you got, like, Gab, like, the owner of Gab is like advocating for secession. Like a lot of people are advocating for secession, and that's just another. Honestly, I think a lot of these solutions are a lazy man's solution to the problem. They don't ever advocating for reading this Constitution, for being active locally, or even talking about how to be active locally. It's always something easy way out.
I don't know. I don't know if I would use the term lazy. What I think it is we're always looking for someone else to fix our problem. I don't have, in other words, what the Convention of States says is I don't have to do anything. My state will send delegates and they'll go fix the problem. Term limits means I don't have to worry about vetting. I don't have to worry about campaigning against someone who I think has served too long. Term limits does it for me. It's an attempt to absolve us of the responsibility we have as citizens. So to me, secession is failure. If we've gotten to the point where the only solution are for states to secede, then either those the irreconcilable differences between the states has gotten so bad that we've gotten to the point where we will not allow disagreement. I mean, that's really the interesting thing. I was listening to a report earlier today. They're looking at the IRS data, and I forget how many billions of dollars a year in income has moved out of New York State. Of course, I used to live in New York State. So that those numbers that perks up my ears, but have moved from like New York State down to Florida. Now, I moved from New York State to Tennessee. Why? Because I couldn't abide the way New York State, the people of New York State allow its government to run. I couldn't abide it anymore. I left. When we get to the point where the residents, the citizens of New York won't allow me to move to Tennessee or make it so intolerable for me to move to Tennessee, then we've got a problem. When we've gotten to the point, I look at it, look at what the recent vote in Oregon, where 5 counties joined 2 counties who did the same thing last year and voted resolutions. They want to secede from Oregon and become part of Idaho. I've got, by the way, I've got an article coming about that in a couple of weeks. I find some very interesting constitutional questions that come up from that. To me, the idea that, hey, if California and New York want to be socialist, crazy, as long as they don't expect me to, they don't come looking to me to deal with it, fine. If you want to live, if the weather in California is so good, you want to live as a subject of Gavin Newsom, that's your right. You have a right to set up a socialist state as well within the limitations of you have to have a Republican form of government. But if you want that government to take care of its citizens from cradle to grave, that's fine. Just don't come looking to me to pay the bill. I don't want to live in that. I've left. So secession comes when one of 2 things happen. Either it usually starts with one group of people saying, we need someone else to help us do this. It's not that, California's crazy, stupid laws and New York's crazy, stupid laws are that bad. It's we want the rest of the country to pay for our mistakes. That's usually one, because people get tired of paying for someone else's mistakes. The other is the intolerance that says you have to be, the rest of the country must be like New York and California. Just as the same way you could say that, it must be like New York, being like Texas and Tennessee or South Dakota. If we will not allow states to be different, then at some point states are going to want to leave, which is why when you look at everything that we keep centralizing in the federal government, when it's all centralized, when it's one size fits all, how can anything be different? How can you escape a badly run state when all the states are forced to be run just as badly? There's a radio program coming out, I think it's Monday. It talks about what happens if liberty in America fails. And to me, when we get to the point where New York and Tennessee cannot exist in the same union, liberty has failed. But it's the same thing. I don't want to have to do things to make this happen. I don't want to be responsible for my vote. I don't want to be responsible for having to look and say, hey, you know what? This person has served too long. Let's find someone else. I don't want to be responsible for working within my state and within my county to tell the federal government, no, you've gone beyond the just powers delegated by the consent of the governed. I would much rather have some other group of people go do that for me so I don't have to. So to me, it's not necessarily lazy, because a lot of people put a lot of time and effort into this. It's the misguided notion that the solution is for someone else to change the heart of the American people, to get them to think differently. And that I don't think works. So hello there, Florida man. Glad you could join us. So, Tunler, that's that's kind of the point that I think it's, and I see it a lot. And I used to say the same thing, right? It'd be a lot easier to say, oh yeah, we'll have a convention of states, send a bunch of people to Philadelphia or something, have them have a whole big debate, come up with an amendment that will magically fix all of our problems. And of course, the government will ignore it, or the courts will find some way around it. But yeah, go ahead and do that, because then I'm not responsible for what I do. That to me is truly the biggest problem with COS, with term limits, with secession, with most of these programs, is they ignore the fundamental fact that governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Who is it? Truman, that had a sign on his desk, "The buck stops here." Well, eventually the buck in America stops actually with the American people. So.
Yeah. it's a big issue right now, because like there's a local YouTube channel that's covers things that are going on in North Idaho. And I mean, you go to the comment section and you got people with all sorts of like reasons or things, excuses for them not to put any effort into trying to fix the problem. I mean, mind you, I don't think it's a mixture of ignorance and putting their energy in the wrong place, because I don't think they realize like what their rights are. I don't think they know how to defend them either really effectively. Um, there was one instance in particular where actually an individual, there's a county that requires masks at the courthouse, and within our Idaho Constitution, it states that the courthouse will be open. Period. There's like no exceptions or anything. It is open. Period.
Mm-hmm.
And of course the cops in the front are saying you need a mask, and an individual is like, well, no, I don't. And like, and you can't do anything because you're talking to walls. The cops don't know anything. Um, the sheriff, obviously, in that respective county, they didn't put any effort into getting a good sheriff. So, of course, the cops are not going to be very good either. They're not going to know anything. Anyways, this individual is like, well, to hell with you guys. And he literally charges trying to get past the cops. Of course, he gets, arrested and all that stuff. But I just, it's one of those situations where it's like you're wasting your breath and your effort when I honestly, I think they should sue the court. It was the judge who said to the cops, don't let anybody in unless they have a mask. I'm like, in my head, I'm like, well, sue the judge personally, because he won.
Let me ask you, do you remember the John Jay quote that I've based the Constitution study on?
Yeah, it's the duty of every member of the state to read and study his constitution so that he has a better perception of when his rights are violated, and he'd be better prepared to defend and assert them, and also to teach the right generation to be free. It's a summary. It's like,
yeah, that's pretty, you got most of the words, not all in the right order, but you got most of the words. So okay, so here you that kind of is the point, right? So what we saw was someone who recognized their rights were being violated, but they were not prepared to defend and assert them properly. Now, this is one of those things where I have no problem. You want to sue the judge, okay, but recognize you're suing a government official in a government court. The deck is stacked against you. The idea that courts are they are outside of politics is a myth. Every person who sits on that bench either was elected or appointed by an elected official. Right? They work for the government, they get a government paycheck, and they've been trained in government supremacy. Now, here's the interesting point. Okay, it's a violation of the Idaho Constitution, which means the officers were violating their oath of office. I'd be curious if there's any language in the Idaho Constitution or Idaho law about the punishment for unlawful detainment or restraint by a law enforcement officer. Right? For example, right, according to the Idaho Constitution, the courthouse is to be open. According to the U.S. Constitution, you cannot be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Meaning your liberty to go into what is supposed to be an open public facility without, unless they use due process to prove you are a danger, they are depriving you of their liberty. If you sue them, you pay yourself damages, assuming you live in the county, right? Because if you sue them, the county's the one that's paying the damages. However, if those officers have denied you a right protected under the Constitution of the United States of America, they have committed a federal crime. So when I consider those situations, I'm the type of guy that likes to think things out ahead of time. My response is I need names and badge numbers so that so that when I call the FBI to file the complaint, I know who to have charged. Because you are right now violating a federal law, 18 U.S.C. Code Section 242. That is a fine or up to a year in jail. By the way, officer, if you even mention reaching for that firearm, that goes to 10 years in jail. See, that is, what you described was a person who was asserting their rights in a bad manner. They basically bowed up to the officers and expected to just bully their way through, which officers are trained. They cannot lose control of a situation. They cannot. So they are, because think about it, assume it's not someone that is trying to exercise a right, assuming that's someone trying to violate the law. By the way, a judge's requirement, that's not law, that's a court order, that's something different, right? So imagine it's not a courthouse. Imagine it's a restaurant. And imagine the person that's trying to get in is a guy who has been having a fight with his wife, and even though there's a restraining order out against him, I just got to go talk to my wife. And he goes pushing his way through. The officer cannot let that happen. So they have been trained that they must maintain control of the situation. So you've put the officer in a position where they cannot back down. They have to arrest you. Now, on the other hand, you look at my way. I'm coming in. Excuse me, officer, but that is a violation. You can't come without a mask. That is a violation of the Idaho Constitution. That means you have violated your oath of office. By the way, you're depriving me of a liberty without due process of law. That's also not only a violation of your oath of office, that is a federal crime. I need your name. I need your badge number so that when I call the FBI, I know who to have them. I know who to have them charge. Now, what have you done? First of all, you started educating the officer, because I bet you dollars to donuts, the officer has no clue what 18 U.S.C. 242 says. You've informed them that you are not the one breaking the law. They are the ones breaking law. They've violated the supreme law of Idaho. They've violated the supreme law of the United States of America. They've violated federal statute. And you've informed them of the penalties. Now the officer has to think. In other words, instead of bowing up and forcing them to push back, you've informed them of the consequences of their decision. Which means your very next call, I should do this. I should have a speed dial on my phone that just says FBI. And just bring up, you want me to call the FBI now? Because you are breaking federal law. I'll be more than happy to call the FBI right now. And you give them a chance to back away without losing control of the situation. They're not letting an aggressive person pass them. They've been schooled in what's going on. And by the way, you do the same thing with the judge. Excuse me, Your Honor, but you're violating Idaho Constitution, which means you're violating your oath of office. You're violating the Constitution of the United States of America, which means you're violating your oath of office. You're committing a federal crime. You're potentially committing an Idaho crime. I will cease to refer to you as your honor now. I will refer to you as Mr. or Ms. because if you persist with this, you have no honor. You violated your oath of office. You are behaving badly. You should be impeached. And in fact, you should be charged with a crime. Again, 1 year in jail. Oh, by the way, you get those bailiffs to grab me, that's 10 years in jail. Do you want to do this or not? For someone that's willing to get aggressive enough to shove in, imagine if he had read and studied his Constitution and he was prepared to assert his rights. Not to simply push in, shove in, I'm going to get my way come, hell or high water, but to use knowledge to make a point and without backing an officer into the corner. Now, again, I've had law enforcement in my family. I've worked with law enforcement. I work with, I deal with my local sheriff. I have a little bit of understanding of what that is like and what their training is like. And that to me is the point is, that to me is a situation where someone does not know how to properly assert their rights. They think that their rights are carte blanche to do what they want, rather than recognizing it's the if you push law enforcement, if you push government physically, they have to push back. If you inform them of the consequences of their actions and then follow through with those consequences, that's when they start learning. For those of you, before you go on, before those of you who just joined, I see several people have joined on YouTube. If you have any questions, please pop them in the comments. They will show up here, and I'll do my best to answer them. But I just wanted to let the new people know. Tell them, what do you think about that response?
Well, it's just kind of. Well, I'm thinking I need to find a piece of legislation regarding whether or not, like, if there's any consequences to someone who violates the U.S. Constitution or the Idaho State Constitution. First, because I don't think the FBI is going to take the call seriously. They're like, oh yeah, okay, sure thing, buddy, in that kind of situation.
There's two things, right? The first purpose is not to get the FBI to come and arrest the cop, right? The first purpose is to inform the cop, inform the law enforcement officer of the consequence. Because I'll bet you dollars don't, even if any of their training involved USC Section 242, they aren't thinking about that. But you're right. If a person contacts the FBI is going to file it in a circular file and not do anything about it. If a few dozen people start doing it, guess what you have the leverage to do? Now you're like, okay, excuse me, I want a FOIA request of all of the violations of 18 USC 242 that the FBI has circle filed. I want them. I want everything you have with a charge of violation of 18 USC 242. Because look at what's been happening with the exposure of the emails from Dr. Fauci. What happens when the FBI starts getting that kind of exposure? Now, again, you have to get around the corporate media. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's simple. I'm not even saying it's going to necessarily fix that particular problem. But if we're doing the right thing, what do you end up with? We end up with, hey, excuse me, representative, I have an FBI office that is ignoring violations of the rights of U.S. citizens. I have here a record. I have a dozen, 2 dozen, 5 dozen, 100, 200 complaints that have been ignored by the FBI. What can we do about it? Find a media outlet. Like I said, corporate media, probably not going to deal with it. Find one that will, and start putting social pressure by going out and showing, hey, You know, the FBI is standing by while Americans' rights are trampled. They are ignoring these requests. They say the rights of the people are not important enough to enforce the law. And what you end up doing then is we don't fix the FBI. But how many people then learn, hey, wait a second, what do you mean? You mean I can actually call the FBI and file a complaint? You know, you mean there's actually a federal law against that? How many people will hear about that, will see it on the news or read it somewhere and say, you know what? Maybe I want to stand up too. Maybe I want to support those people that are standing up. It's not necessarily about fixing the FBI. It's about helping educate the American people that they are not subjects of government. They are its master. Those in government are public servants. We are the masters. They are the servants. And can you think of a better object lesson than a citizen pushing back on a law enforcement officer for violating their rights criminally, not just a lawsuit, criminally? And hopefully sooner or later, one of those cases will actually be charged. And then think of it, you're a law enforcement officer. Look what the law enforcement officers have done in Minneapolis, in Portland, in Seattle, where they're in New York, in Washington, where they are backing off because they know they're not getting any support for the actions that they're doing, right? They're not going to enforce crimes because they know they're going to get called names and no one's going to come to their defense. Imagine what happens when you have the American people start standing up and going, you know what, officer, if you protect my rights, if you arrest that BLM activist, that Antifa activist, that rioter outside my store, I will stand with you. I will do more than simply, say, hey, gee, thanks. I will go. I will be part of it. I will be the face that stands up and says, this man saved my life. This man saved my business. This man saved me. And you're throwing him out for that? The next step being, wait a second. This man refused to protect my rights. This woman refused to protect my rights. And now they get charged with a crime. How long do you think the law enforcement will stop considering their oath to the constitutions of the several states and of the United States if they know there's a chance they're going to be held accountable for not fulfilling that oath? It's a long-term solution, but it's back to, do we deal with the root of the problem, or do we just throw a temper tantrum, try to barge in and get our 15 minutes of fame before we're carted off to jail? How about you, Christopher? I see you popped in here. How are you doing today? Well, you're unmuted, but I can't hear you, Christopher.
Let me see. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I hear you now. Good to have you.
All right, good. You?
Okay, I got a question from Florida Man. Wasn't the Constitution first broken shortly after being ratified by Hamilton, creating a national bank? Well, the issue with the national bank, I know where you're going. I wouldn't say the Constitution was broken. It was violated. I guess you could say broken because you say break the law, but the when I think of the Constitution being broken, the Constitution's a compact. It's an agreement. The agreement didn't fall apart and disappear because the government, Hamilton was its primary, he was the point person, but the government was working to establish a national bank. Now the question is, under Article 1, Section 8, since Congress has the authority to coin money and set the value of foreign funds, how do you go about doing that? I mean, was the Constitution violated the day it was ratified? Probably. I mean, I go all the way back. I like to pick on Marbury versus Madison, 1801, was a question of violation of the Constitution. The whole reason we have a federal court system is to arbitrate violations of the Constitution and federal law. So, I'm sure if we looked real hard, we could find violations of the Constitution that actually predate even Hamilton. The question is it the law, and do we apply it or not, or do we throw our hands up in frustration and say, well, you can't fight City Hall. I'm sorry, you can't. It just takes a lot of work and a lot of effort and a lot of stick-to-itiveness. So, what else we got? Well, you guys figure out again. YouTube, Periscope. While we're coming up with great questions, you can ask through the chat. Let me remind everyone, I am still looking for locations for my Knowing Your Rights tour. Right now, I've got dates scheduled through North Dakota and Wyoming in August. Go to constitutionstudy.com/tour, and you can find all the dates, locations, more information. But I'm looking to do more. I know Tunnel Lord's trying to get me to northern Idaho. We're having a bit of a scheduling issue, but we're trying to see if we can make that happen. It doesn't have to be those dates. Since I'm already going to be in North Dakota and Wyoming, I'm closer to Idaho. He's trying to get me to go up to Idaho. I really hope I can make it. I want to meet him and everyone else up there face to face. But if you don't live between Middle Tennessee and Idaho, that doesn't mean I won't come and see you. I'm doing Missouri the last week of, actually, we'll grab my calendar here. Actually, I can do this. Constitution study. Might help if I could type. So I'm going to be in Missouri the last week of August. We are deep, we're fairly a third of the way into June. So July would have to be close to Middle Tennessee, but we still have some time. Probably August may be a little tight, but we might look into September. So yeah, August 28th, I'm going to be in Missouri. So, you can find, if you're somewhere within, driving distance, if you want, I could do Missouri, Kansas, Arkansas, maybe even Oklahoma, the end of August into early September. I do have to be home. There's certain dates in September that I have to be home for. But let's see if we can, if you want to do it again, go to constitutionstudy.com/tour. If you go to the bottom, there is a form. Just give me your name, your email address, where it is you want, the location you want me to go. And we'll jump on a Zoom call and we'll see if we can make it happen. The Knowing Your Rights tour, the primary thing is really what Tunnel Lord was just talking about. It's what are our rights, recognize when they're violated, and how do we defend and assert them and do so properly. That's the main focus, although I am doing a couple other things on the side while we're doing that. So if I'm going to be anywhere near you, I hope you'll join one of those sessions. If you want me to come to your location and we can put together an event, it doesn't have to be a big event. It doesn't have to be 100 people. We can work something. I'm going to be in Thermopolis, Wyoming, meeting with some people in the back of a bakery. I'm not expecting a ginormous crowd, so we can work stuff out. Just check it out and let me know, because this is the type of education that I am trying to bring to the people of the United States as we go through this. So, Tunnel Lord, did you have something you were going to say before I went off on my little discussion about the tour?
Yeah. So there's this interesting. There was a a law in air quotes back in 1934 called the NFA Act. And I was listening to an individual talking about the history of that law, and he brought up the point that like they were concerned about not violating the Constitution, and their reasoning for making this law or why it wasn't violating the Constitution because it didn't ban the particular items, it just required you to have a tax, which I was like, well, why did they? An argument to shoot that down straight away would be, well, they made that tax or that law to prevent me from getting a firearm, that particular firearm.
Right. They infringed on your right to keep and bear arms, which is a direct violation of the Constitution. But remember, right, I'm going to give you two quotes. One you'll probably recognize from the president. The belief that the Second Amendment, like any other amendment, is not absolute. That is a commonly spread misconception in the legal community because we've allowed them to get away with it. Right? Recognize the Constitution is ink on parchment. It is not going to dope slap President Biden for saying something that's stupid. That's our job. That's our job. But here's the other thing that is how they got away with it. There is a theory, you see it mostly in First Amendment cases before the court, the idea of what's called scrutiny and how strict the scrutiny must be. And the logic being, well, how important is a right? How strictly must we look at the right to determine when government has the ability, the authority to infringe on it? Every time you hear a court case and they talk about scrutiny, light bulbs should go off in your head. They're talking about when is a government authorized to infringe on your rights? There is only one time the government is authorized to infringe on your rights, when they have followed due process. So what you have is a bunch of legal weenies. And if memory serves, the NFA came out during Prohibition. So you talk about one bad decision making another bad decision. So you have Prohibition, and if I can spin off just a little bit, I've done a little bit of research on this. Prohibition started because the different temperance groups could not get people to stop drinking. So they found politicians to make it a law. Right? They want to enforce their opinion on other people. They tried to enforce that. Well, what happens when you restrict the ability of people to do something they want? They take that action underground. In other words, they created a whole criminal element around illegal liquor, the illegal sale and transportation of liquor. Interestingly, the drinking of liquor was not prohibited. It was the sale and distribution of liquor that was of intoxicating beverages. So you create opportunities for organized crime. Organized crime is not known for following the law. And as these different criminal elements are fighting amongst each other, a lot of innocent people are getting killed in the crossfire. So the government says, ooh, the government doesn't say, listen, we've made a situation that we've given an incentive for crime. We've made something criminal that we really shouldn't have, because we're basically telling people we don't think you should drink, so don't drink. We've imposed our will on others that has had the unintended consequence of encouraging crime, not only encouraging crime, but encouraging it to organize. The two biggest things that came out of Prohibition were organized crime in America and NASCAR. I love that part because I'm an auto racing fan, and I don't watch NASCAR now, but I watched it for many years. I always loved the fact that NASCAR was basically a bunch of good old boy bootleggers that decided they wanted to race their hot rod jalopies. That's how NASCAR started. So they're going to fix this by saying, well, okay, we're going to restrict people from having certain firearms because they're dangerous, right? You got Tommy guns. You have fully automatic weapons on the streets. Criminals are using them. Innocent people are dying. We have to do, and we've heard this before, we have to do something. So what we'll do is we'll pass a law that says, no, you can't have those guns. well, we can't legally prohibit people from having guns, so we'll make them go through a background check and pay a tax. That's basically what NFA arms are. You can get an NFA, you can own a fully automatic weapon. It has to go through, you have to go through a special background check and pay a $200 tax. Now, they have prohibited automatic weapons produced after, I forget what year, 1992, I think it was. So they're becoming much more rare, much more expensive, but they said we can infringe on your rights because government has a compelling interest in public safety. Then your rights aren't rights. Your rights are not unalienable. Government can take away your rights if they think it's fit. Now, pop out of that. When have we seen exactly the same thing happen? I'm old enough to remember right before there was a war on crime. I mean, I'm sorry, a war on drugs. I was around for, I was in, let's see, I think I just graduated high school when Nancy Reagan came up with Just Say No. All right, been around a while. So what happened? We have a bunch of people that think drugs are bad. Now, personally, I think drugs are bad. I think for the most part, I think many of these drugs are dangerous for you. They do terrible things to your body. I've seen people who've been on drugs. I've seen them turn into these zombies. I've seen people who have had very, very bad problems with drugs. Does that mean I think I have the authority to tell you that you shouldn't take drugs or what drugs you should and shouldn't take? Because understand, the difference between marijuana and ibuprofen legally is the decision of a government bureaucrat. Starts with a decision, a government bureaucrat frequently with congressional, under the auspices of, Congress has said the FDA gets to determine what drugs are dangerous, what drugs are not. So the only difference between marijuana, heroin, cocaine, aspirin, ibuprofen, acetaminophen is the decision of a government bureaucrat who's bureaucrats as to what is and what the people should and should not be allowed to have access to. So we have this war on drugs, and what happens? We have drug cartels making billions of dollars, bringing drugs illegally into the country. How do they do that? Well, sometimes they just cross the border illegally. Sometimes they do it with and without immigrants who are coming here to work. They go, hey, we have this whole pipeline. We can bring drugs in. We can bring people in. We can bring foreign actors in. We've got this whole thing set up. Because the government said, because somebody convinced the government that they had the authority to tell people what they could not do with their own bodies, deprive them of the property they have in their body. And the unintended consequence was drug cartels, which has led to a militarization of police forces. You have the Drug Enforcement Agency, absolutely illegal. You have all this work with them and the FBI and militarizing cities and police forces to deal with the ever-growing. You have an arms race, effectively, between law enforcement and the cartels, primarily because government said, don't do that. We're going to make it illegal for you to have those drugs. And what is the solution the government has to the problem they created? More laws to restrict people. And sometimes it's laws to say who isn't allowed in the country. Sometimes it's the laws of who, part of the gun control is from the crime generated by the drug trade. It's crime in general. A lot of that comes from the drug trade. You have gangs in the streets shooting at each other. Let's create another law that actually doesn't deal with the problem, but we're doing something. So I find it interesting that you can link the NFA with the assault weapons ban. you follow this, we follow the same process over and over again. We get, we convince the American people that this is a terrible thing, we must outlaw it. That creates a criminal element. That leads to laws that further infringe on the rights of the people, which creates even more crime, which creates even more laws over and over and over again. I believe it was Einstein who defined insanity as doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. Okay, let's go back. We got any more questions here? No more questions there. How about on the Zoom? We got anybody else somebody got a question on Zoom besides, Tunnel Lords have been active. How about you, Chris? You got an idea?
Not at the moment, no.
Chris, remember, was it you that you live up in the Pennsylvania area?
No, I live in Illinois.
Illinois, that was it. I couldn't remember if it was Pennsylvania or Illinois. Because I'm actually, I reached out to several people that are involved with the Institute on the Constitution, and several of them were in Illinois to see if we can get an event there on my trip. So I don't know if you're involved with the Institute on the Constitution.
I'm a member. I donate to them every month, like $10.
Okay. I sent to host and chapter leaders. So I haven't heard back from any of them, but if you're involved with any of the local groups, say you may want to if you put in a good word, that wouldn't be a bad thing. If you want to see me come to Illinois, the only problem with coming to Illinois is I got to figure out how am I going to get in and out of Illinois?
Oh yeah, the corruption. Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry. I take my personal security seriously, and Illinois doesn't want me to maintain my personal security.
Yeah, it's anti-gun state. Yeah, yeah.
So that to me would be the only problem in Illinois, is I'm not spending an entire trip unprotected because one communist state doesn't want me there. Now, that said, I am more than willing, of finding a spot just outside Illinois where we can do something. Because the problem is federal law, even though it's all unconstitutional, but federal law says that as long as I'm driving through Illinois, I can have the gun as long as it's unloaded in the back of my vehicle.
Oh yeah, in a container. Yeah.
Yep. It has to be in a box, unloaded in a lockbox, not accessible to the car. Huh?
No, it's it's a state law. Never mind, because the state law is you have to unload it, put the gun in the glove compartment, and then the ammo in the trunk. That's the state law.
Yeah, well,
It's
federal
weird.
law. Federal law says I can do that as long as I don't have a destination in Illinois.
Yeah, we can
So
do
if
it
I-
outside.
Huh? Yeah. So if you find a spot outside Illinois, that's fine. We could do it up. I don't know where in Illinois. Where in Illinois are you? You can do it maybe St. Louis, outside
Chicago.
St. Louis, Wisconsin,
Not
Iowa, somewhere like that.
Yeah, I'm closer to Wisconsin.
Yeah, Wisconsin would be nice. I haven't been to Wisconsin in a while. I've been there once. I have a game I played with my daughter since she was little, where we get points based on where you've been and what you've done there, right? So like you get 1 point if you've been to the airport, you get 2 points if you've driven through it, you get 3 points if you've actually been on the ground there and done something, you get 4 points if you spent the night, you get 5 points if you had a mailing address there. So when we were homeschooling my daughter, part of her geography education was I was traveling for business, and we kept track of what states I had driven through, what states I'd been in the airport. So I've been to Wisconsin before, but I'm looking forward to actually going to Minneapolis. I don't have anything in Wisconsin or Minnesota yet. Right now, I've got 3 in North Dakota. I've got 1 confirmed in Wyoming. I've got another one. Has Douglas confirmed? I don't know if I've been working on a lot of different stuff here. So no, Douglas has not confirmed yet. So I'm trying to get another one in Douglas, Wyoming. And then, like I said, I've got 2 later in the month in Missouri. So, we'll see what we can make happen. Okay, I did see a question. So let me go back. I did see something pop up. How much does it cost for taking up the court system, for taking cases up to the court system? Let's say you wanted to sue a state government for a certain gun law. Well, Florida man, I'm not a lawyer and I've never played one on TV. I have no idea. There are going to be some court filing costs, but most likely, unless you are very familiar with the process, you're going to want some sort of legal representation or assistance. There are organizations that do it pro bono. For example, Gun Laws, the Second Amendment Foundation, and there's another one. I'm drawing a blank. Second Amendment Foundation. I think there's another one. I'm drawing a blank at the moment that they take up cases, especially if it's really advancing a Second Amendment argument. So the nice thing about those, again, they don't charge you. Most of those don't charge you for their legal services. They survive on donations and on, there you go, Gun Owners of America. I don't think Gun Owners of America take cases. They file their own cases, but I don't think they provide legal services to third parties. Firearm Policy Coalition. Yeah, I'm not sure. I was thinking specifically of organizations, groups that do legal work for someone else, not GOA and all that. They sue for themselves. They have their own lawyers, but I know Second Amendment Foundation helps other people sue as well. So you may want to look at that. I don't know what the court filing costs are. At lower courts, it's probably not that big a deal. But if you're talking about taking something up to the higher courts, you've got a significant investment in time and effort, and it's going to take some money. Of course, then again, maybe you get a legal fund set up and have help with those costs if you've got a really good case. So, all right, what else we got? We have about 20 more minutes left before I got to run.
Have you ever I know you've convinced a legislature, I think that or you taught her something about the Constitution she didn't know. I'm curious, have you ever convinced a judicial branch person that there's no such thing as judicial supremacy or federal supremacy?
It was actually the one I'm thinking about. It was actually a constitutional law lawyer, someone with 10 years of experience about the Electoral College. And I simply showed, I pointed out something that you'd never seen before. There's this, I never thought of that moment. And I pointed it out to her, and, that to me, that was, that talks more about law schools. Have I ever convinced someone in the judicial branch? Not directly. I did get contacted by someone several months ago. Her husband actually sued a couple of county officials and won the case, according to the judge, in no small part because of his knowledge of both the state and federal constitutions, of which I had not only helped, but encouraged him to do. So the radio programs, the podcasts, I wasn't directly involved, but through the educational tools I put out, he was able to learn about the U.S. Constitution. He took the time to learn about a state constitution. So when he sued these 2 county officials, I believe it was 2 county officials, and he could stand before the judge and make a good case, and he ended up winning the case. So I've reached out to them saying I'd love to actually discuss that with them on the podcast, on the radio program, because it's really good, I think, for people to see that, we do win sometimes, even if it's a relatively small win. To them, it's not a small win. That's a really big deal. but they were not interested in actually getting that public. But so I won't use names or details, but beyond the fact that the guy won a case because he knew the Constitution of the United States and of his state, and part of that came from instructions that I had given, and part of it came from his own research, encouraging him to do his own research. Now, that said, I would love the opportunity. Like I said, I have these little weird things, I could just imagine, walking into a legislative committee meeting or being asked to be involved in a court case and schooling a member of the judicial branch. And I have no illusions that I would walk out of that scot-free. I'm sure any judge that I would remind them of their oath and their duty to support the Constitution of the United States and of their failure to do so would consider that contempt. Now, personally, my laughing point is, I'm not in contempt of the court. I'm in contempt of you, and I'm sure that would put me in jail for at least a couple nights. But that hasn't happened. Not that I'm looking forward to it, but at some point, people have to stand up. Someone has to stand up, and then someone has to come alongside to help. And there is little more encouraging than when you're standing alone and someone comes up and stands with you. I've had that in other situations, not constitutional situations, other situations where I had to stand up and someone, without prompting, stood up with me when I had to deal with something very difficult. And it was quite a good feeling to know that somebody was there and had my back, which is why I make a point of, very few of us will be willing to stand, but most of us should be willing to support those who do. So, all right, anything else? I know my notes, like I said, my reminder notes got screwed up. I cannot find a system for the website that is both a good calendar and that has good reminders. So I have this kind of hodgepodge system, and I goofed something up this week, I guess, so that not everybody got the notices. So that's for the Zoom side. I can't get on Facebook, so I can't do anything there. I used to get a lot of traffic from Facebook. That's all gone. Florida Man, you're on YouTube. I hope you'll spread the word and let people know. These Q&As, I see the same names over and over again. So I'm assuming you guys enjoy this. I'm assuming that you find this valuable, and I hope that means that you're also spreading the word about it. I want to start spreading the word on the radio program. I haven't really. But I hope you're spreading the word so that other people have a chance to simply get a question answered. So many people I run into have these interesting little questions. I'd love to see them on here. I'd love the chance to answer those questions, even if they don't come on the Zoom call, if they're just on YouTube or Periscope.
I don't know what it is. I mean, I've put it out there. I've put it out there a bunch of times. I mean, I don't know if it's just the they don't know about it, or maybe it's the time of day or the day itself.
I don't know. It's been my experience that a very small percentage of people will actually that sign up for anything actually engage in it. For example, I have a meeting with my apprentices this weekend, and I sent out multiple notes with surveys saying, when would you give me a day and a time frame, morning, afternoon, evening, when you guys can make it, and guys and gals can make it, and I'll set up a Zoom call, and because I want to have a meeting with them. And so far, only 2 people responded, and I'm kind of curious how many people are actually going to show up to the Zoom meeting. Because I know a lot of people, it's like they sign up, and I appreciate the sign up, especially if you're paying for a service like the advanced scholarship programs, the apprenticeships, the journeyman. We're all busy. We've all got lots of distractions, so I don't take it personally, but I just know that I've got, I tell a story. I've got one guy, there's a guy I used to meet in town all the time. He worked at this one store. I was in there regularly. We got talking. He was always interested in what I was doing. He was interested in the book, in the podcast, in the Facebook, everything. He's got family. He lives a couple towns over. He's got family that's involved with politics in the town. And he was always talking about doing something there. He was always talking about getting me out there for some event, and never happened. I mean, we're talking a year and a half now, maybe closer to 2. And it never happened. Of course, now he doesn't work at that store anymore, so I don't see him anymore. But there's a lot of that, and it can be deflating. There's it takes a lot to put together all of this stuff, and it's just disappointing when you see people that sign up and dribs and drabs trying to keep this all running. But I feel just called to do it every time. A little bit behind the curtain, right? I've been doing this now for 2.5 years, I think. 2.5. I think it's 2.5 years full time. I've been trying to do this, and it's not paying for itself yet. I mean, it's which can be discouraging. I look at it and say, at what point do I put the Constitution study on the back burner and go find something that's more gainful employment, right? I mean, like I said, I had a very lucrative career in IT. But every time LinkedIn pops up a message, hey, there's a job that meets your qualifications in your area, I look at it and I'm like, I think I'm still supposed to be doing this. So I'm honestly, there are times, open the curtain, man. There are times when I wonder, am I out shouting at the storm? With a few people that are listening to me. So the more people that spread, the more people that know. Trust me, I get a tremendous boost from the people who are actually engaged. I've got a couple people that have a monthly subscription, right? So those monthly subscription pops up. That's a bit of a boost, but so it's tough, but I love doing it. I feel called to do this. So I recognize that sometimes it's going to be tough, and a lot of people are going to talk the talk, but they're not going to walk the walk. But again, it's back up to the few of us that are willing to do it that make all the difference. Florida man, what type of IT do you do? Well, I ended my career with doing data center systems engineer. So I dealt mostly with servers, a little bit of networking. I worked for Cisco. I worked for IBM. I was mostly a server guy and software guy. But in my career, I've done everything. I've written software. I've done project management. I've done help desk. I've done servers. I've done small networks. I've done software development projects. So but the last 20 some odd years of my career, I was a systems engineer in data centers. So I was doing, large server farm deployments, large application deployments. I was selling, x86 based servers. I did it for IBM. I did it for Cisco. It was. I was good at it. I enjoyed it. I got tired of it. I was I still like to be in IT. I still play. I have a baby cloud in my office. I built a cloud out of Raspberry Pis to see if I could do it. I'm I'm not happy. I use a tool called Buffer to schedule social media posts because I'm really bad at that. So I found this tool. I'm using, there's several tools. I'm currently using Buffer because I've got a free version. It only works with, well, it works with Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Well, I can't do Facebook, but I can do Twitter and LinkedIn. But I want to do Gab. I want to do Parler. I want to do Telegram. So what I'm actually doing is I'm designing, in what little time I have available, my own little app that I can use to integrate to scheduled social media posts on any platform that has an API I can talk to. Because I want to make that part of my life easier. So when it comes to IT, I'm a bit of a jack of all trades. I love Linux. I always say, as soon as someone comes up with a Linux smartphone, I'm dumping my Apple. I'd run a Linux smartphone before I'd run anything else. I mean, that's just kind of what I've been doing.
You probably shouldn't waste your time with Parler because I don't think a lot of people even use Parler, like because Parler censors and they sort of flaked out when it came to freedom of speech. So
Well, Parler really got, after they got shut down, when they came back, they've been a mess. They came back, they were weak, but they were still working. I didn't encounter any censorship. There was none that I was aware of. But what happened is they went through a software upgrade. And ever since, I cannot log in. And their customer support is atrocious. I mean, god awful. The only way to contact support is through an email address that apparently either nobody watches or they've got, some intern. And I must have sent 8, 10 emails going, hey, I'm trying to log into my account. So here's the thing. When I first signed up with Parler, you had to use a phone number. They did not support emails. You did phone numbers. They get their new software upgrade. They're looking for a login with an email address and a username. I said, if I've got a username, I have no idea what it was. I've never used it. I signed in with a phone number. How do I get signed in? I can't even reset my password because you're asking for an email address I don't think I gave you and a username that I've never used. I use a password management tool. If I had used a username and password, it'd be in the password management tool. I sent half a dozen emails going, does anybody listen to this nonsense? Finally, I get an email back saying, well, we don't see any account with this particular email address. I go, no kidding, stupid. I told you I set up with a phone number. How do I reset a password using the phone number that I gave you, since that's the only thing I have from your account? Silence. And in the last day or two, they've been down. So, I'm like, yeah, Parler, it's sad. To me, what's sad is not so much that Parler got shut down. I mean, that's sad. But what's sad is Parler either couldn't or wouldn't recover. I don't know if it was a technology issue. I don't know if it was a funding issue. But when they came back, they were never right again. And, I don't know if they're punch drunk or what. Oh, by the way, Florida, I forgot to notice, you said you do cybersecurity in a college ATM. My home network is all based on Meraki. Since I used to be a Cisco employee, I got a bunch of Meraki gear, cheap. So when my local ISP, when they have to come in and do any work, they drool over my network. I have more network security on my home network than probably than they do in their office. Probably more than the Colonial Pipeline did. That got them shut down. So I still play with computers for fun sometimes.
Well, yeah, no. Problem with Gab right now is that I guess you could say the main page is like full of like I wouldn't say doomers. but more of like, don't bother trying to fix it, you know.
Yeah.
And there's like no alternative. No one's like, unless it's just, I don't know, unless these accounts are getting to the front page artificially. I don't know. Um, but yeah, I mean, you read through comments of some posts and stuff, and like no one's got any suggestions of what to do. Nothing. I mean, I look at the uh the respective Gab groups for each state, and there's like no activity. I'm thinking this is a perfect opportunity to get organized. Like perfect. You know, that's what I'm doing in my group, in the Idaho group, and it's pretty active. Like I will say, I can almost confidently say we probably take the cake for activity in our local state group and on the Gab. But like you got nothing, no movement at all, and that's if that's how Gab is, I guarantee you that's how localities are.
Well, to me, that isn't an issue with Gab. That's an issue with human nature. We love to whine and complain. We just don't want to do anything about it. We want someone else to do it for us. And that's the name of the game, right? It's not. There's was the 90-10 rule. 10%, 90% of the work will be done by 10% of the people. It's the same scenario. You talk about Gab. So, for example, I set up the Constitution Scholars, right? And I have a group in the scholars for each state, and every night, pretty much every night, when I'm sitting around watching TV, I have my iPad out and I'm scrolling through news feeds. Right? I'm looking at all these different news feeds, and whenever something catches my eye that I think would be interesting in the scholars for a specific state, I flag it. Generally, the next morning, what I'll do is I'll post it. So if you actually look, I post in each of the groups. I'm trying to remember the last time someone other than me posted anything in any of the groups on the Constitution Scholars. So that's now. Actually, what am I looking for? I was just looking for something here. So most people say nothing. I get a couple comments here and there. I have a couple. I've had a couple people message me with information, but again, and again, it's a small group. People gone to sign up. It's for those of you who don't know, Constitution Scholars, the Constitution Study is the main site. That's what I started. That's the name of my organization, the Constitution Study. I wanted a place where we could speak freely, we could discuss constitutional things, where we could find people that were focused on the Constitution, but we're not dependent on some other thing. I didn't want to go through the Facebook thing again, especially since I can't even get on Facebook anymore. But I didn't want to build a Parler, right? And I built a Parler community and Parler dies. I wanted something that I controlled. So I created a website called constitutionscholars.com, which with an S is plural. It is free to register. I have different groups I've set up. Right now, the groups are set up based on states. I'm begging people to say, hey, if you've got something else to discuss, I'll create another group and we'll discuss it. If it makes sense, but I've got free books up there. I've got free videos of my webinars up there. I've gone so far as from Memorial Day to Independence Day, I'm raffling off a signed copy of my book to people who post or make original posts on scholars. What I mean is, don't just comment or something, or just reply and say, hey, I'm here. If you post something, even if it's just a clip of an article, that's a raffle ticket for a free book. Just to try and get people to do something on there. Guess how much content I've got so far? Yeah, that's about as much content as I've gotten so far. people are just, they want to say they've done something, but they don't actually want to, they don't seem to actually want to do something. So what are you gonna do?
People gotta wake up and realize that they're out of time. They have to either do something now or there won't be anything to,
Well, you know what they say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So we're hitting the bottom of the hour. We've run out of questions. I think I'm gonna call it a night, everyone. Hopefully next time I'll do a better job with the reminders. Let's see. Is it 2 weeks or 3 weeks this time? It'll actually be 2 weeks because we're only on the 10th. So it'll be 2 weeks. That will be June 24th. No, sorry, that was, wrong day. So yeah, June 24th. Like I said, hopefully I'll send out the reminders. If you want to join the Zoom call and you haven't already registered, just go to constitutionsociety.com, look for the live Q&A in the calendar, register for any of them. You'll join the list and you'll get the notifications, the reminders with the links for the Zoom call. Please share the word, help keep this going, let's lead as many horses to this water as we can and then see how it works from there. So thanks everyone. Have a great night and we'll be live again in a couple weeks.